Hey everyone, welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we're going to be taking a deep dive into something that could be a real game changer. We're talking about thyroid eye disease, or TED as it's often called. Now it might sound like just another medical term, but for the thousands who suffer from it, TED is a life-altering condition. Imagine waking up one day and your eyes start to bulge, your eyelids swell, your vision blurs. And it's not just about how you look. It's about struggling with everyday tasks like reading or driving, feeling self-conscious in social situations, and facing years of treatments, potentially even surgery.
Yeah, it can be a really tough road for patients. And for decades, the treatments for TED haven't really addressed the core problem. It's been all about suppressing the immune system with things like steroids, which, as you know, come with a whole host of side effects and don't always work that well.
Exactly.
But what we're diving into today gives us reason to be optimistic. We're exploring the research on a new drug called Teprotumumab. And get this, it's not just about managing symptoms. This drug actually targets the root cause of TED, potentially changing the way we think about and treat this disease. Yeah, it's really exciting. What's fascinating about this research is that it targets a specific molecular pathway that's gone haywire in TED patients. Think of it like a domino effect gone wrong.
Okay, I'm intrigued. But before we get into all the scientific details, can we just break down exactly what TED is? For those of us who aren't doctors.
Absolutely. So imagine the tissues surrounding your eyes. In TED, these tissues become inflamed, and they start to build up, almost like excess construction material piling up around a building. And that's what causes the eyes to bulge, the eyelids to swell, and the vision to become blurry.
Wow, okay, that makes sense. And this can happen in varying degrees of severity.
Right. There's actually a clinical activity score that doctors use to assess the severity of TED. Mild cases might involve some redness and irritation, while moderate cases can cause significant swelling and double vision. But in severe cases, the eye bulging can be so pronounced that it affects a person's ability to close their eyelids, leading to dryness, ulcers, and even vision loss.
That sounds really scary. So the goal is to catch it early and prevent those more serious complications, right?
That's the ideal scenario, and that's why this research is so crucial, because for the first time we have a treatment that's not just putting a Band-Aid on the problem, it's actually targeting the underlying mechanisms of the disease.
Okay, so let's dive into the science a bit. What's going on at the molecular level that causes all this havoc?
Well, it all starts with a receptor called IGF-1R. Think of it like a lock on the surface of cells in the tissues around your eyes. And in TED patients, this lock is essentially stuck in the on position, sending out signals that tell those tissues to grow and remodel even when they shouldn't.
So it's like a construction crew that's gone rogue and started building without permits.
Exactly. And what's even more interesting is that another receptor called TSHR is also involved in this process. They kind of work together to create this inflammatory storm in the eye socket.
Okay, so we've got these two troublemaker receptors, IGF-1R and TSHR, causing all this inflammation and tissue buildup around the eyes. And that's where Teprotumumab comes in, right?
Yeah. Right. Now imagine Teprotumumab as a special key designed to fit that IGF-1R lock. It binds to the receptor and essentially shuts it down, preventing it from sending out those errant construction signals.
So it's like hitting the pause button on all that unwanted growth and remodeling.
Exactly. And here's the really cool part. By blocking IGF-1R, Teprotumumab indirectly inhibits the activity of TSHR as well. So it's like hitting two birds with one stone.
Wow, a double whammy. Now, this all sounds great in theory, but does it actually work in real life?
That's what the researchers set out to discover. And the results of their clinical trials are what's making waves in the medical world. They conducted two major trials, phase 2 and phase 3, to see how effective and safe Teprotumumab is in treating TED.
Okay, so let's talk trials. What did they actually do in these studies, and what did they find?
Well, in the phase 2 trial, they recruited patients with moderate to severe active TED. And this is important. They specifically focused on patients who were recently diagnosed. The reason for this is that the earlier you intervene, the better the chances of preventing permanent damage.
So it's kind of like catching a fire in its early stages, before it spreads and causes too much destruction.
Exactly. So they randomly assigned these patients to receive either Teprotumumab or a placebo, which is basically a dummy treatment with no active ingredients.
Okay, so it's a head-to-head comparison to see if the drug is truly making a difference.
Yeah.
And how did they actually administer the treatment?
The participants received intravenous infusions of Teprotumumab or the placebo every 3 weeks for a total of 8 infusions over a period of 24 weeks. They started with a lower dose and then gradually increased it.
Okay, so it's a pretty intensive treatment regimen. But the big question is, did it work?
The results were pretty remarkable. They were primarily looking at two things. First, they measured the reduction in proptosis, which is the bulging of the eyes. And second, they looked at the overall clinical activity score, which takes into account a range of symptoms like swelling redness and pain.
So it's not just about how the eyes look. It's about how the patients are actually feeling right.
Absolutely. And what they found was that the group receiving teprotumumab showed significantly greater improvement in both proptosis and clinical activity score compared to the placebo group.
Okay, so it's not just a tiny improvement. It's a significant difference. That's promising.
It is. And here's what's even more impressive. They started seeing noticeable improvements even after just 2 infusions. That's pretty fast acting for a treatment for a chronic condition like TED.
2 infusions. That's incredible. I'm guessing the patients were pretty happy about that.
You bet. It's like a ray of hope shining through after years of struggling with this condition.
Now, I know we're only scratching the surface here, but before we move on, can you give us a little more detail on how much the proptosis actually improved? I mean, was it like a tiny change or something that you could really see?
Well, on average, patients receiving teprotumumab experienced a reduction in proptosis of about 4 millimeters or more. And to put that into perspective, that's comparable to what you might expect from surgical correction.
Yeah, that's a huge difference. That's got to be life-changing for these patients.
It is. And remember, we're just talking about the phase 2 trial here. The phase 3 trial, which was even larger and more comprehensive, essentially confirmed these findings.
Okay, this is all starting to sound like a real breakthrough. But I'm sure there's more to the story, right? What about side effects? No drug is perfect.
That's true. No drug is without its potential downsides. But thankfully, the side effects reported in both trials were mostly mild and manageable. Things like muscle spasms, nausea, hair loss, and diarrhea.
Okay, so not exactly fun, but also not life-threatening.
Exactly. The one thing they did have to watch out for was hyperglycemia, or high blood sugar, particularly in patients who already had diabetes. But even then, it was usually manageable with adjustments to their medication.
So it's something to be aware of and monitor closely, but not necessarily a deal breaker for most patients.
Right. It's all about weighing the potential benefits against the risks. And in this case, the benefits seem to far outweigh the risks for many TED sufferers.
Okay, so we've got a potential game changer on our hands. A drug that targets the root cause of TED, shows promising results in clinical trials, and has a relatively manageable side effect profile. I'm feeling pretty optimistic right now.
As you should be. This research really does open up a whole new era in TED treatment. And it's not just about the physical changes, it's about the impact on patients' lives, their emotional well-being, their ability to function in their daily lives, their sense of self.
This is really powerful stuff. So what's next? Where do we go from here?
Well, in part 2, we'll dive deeper into the implications of this research. We'll explore the potential long-term impact on patients' lives, discuss the challenges that still lay ahead, and ponder some intriguing questions about the future of TED treatment.
I can't wait to hear more. This is truly fascinating stuff. And for our listeners out there, if you're interested in learning more about this groundbreaking research, be sure to tune in for part 2 of our deep dive. Yeah. Until then, keep those eyes peeled. No pun intended. Welcome back to the deep dive. In part 1, we really got into the nitty-gritty of thyroid eye disease, and we learned about a potential new treatment called Teprotumumab, which, as we discussed, targets the root cause of TED, and has shown really impressive results in clinical trials. What I found really hopeful is that it works pretty quickly, providing relief to those who have been suffering, sometimes for years.
Yeah, it's true, and that rapid improvement can be incredibly powerful, both physically and psychologically. You know, TED is so much more than just a physical condition. It impacts every aspect of a person's life, from their relationships to their work to their sense of self.
Absolutely. And in this part, I'm hoping we can dig a little deeper into what this new treatment could really mean for people living with TED. What are the potential long-term implications?
Well, first and foremost, teprotumumab offers a glimmer of hope for patients who previously had very limited treatment options. Imagine living with bulging eyes, double vision, constant discomfort for years. With the only relief coming from medications with unpleasant side effects, teprotumumab offers a much more targeted approach, addressing the underlying cause of TED, instead of just masking the symptoms.
Right. It's like finally having the right tool for the job, instead of trying to make do with a makeshift solution.
Exactly. And that can make a world of difference for patients. Imagine being able to see clearly again without double vision, to look in the mirror and recognize yourself, to feel comfortable in your own skin. These are the kinds of transformations that teprotumumab could make possible.
That's really powerful. It's not just about treating a disease.
No.
It's about restoring a person's quality of life, their sense of self, their hope for the future.
Absolutely. And that's why this research is so significant. It's not just a scientific advancement. It's a beacon of hope for countless individuals and their families.
But as with any new treatment, I imagine there are bound to be challenges and questions that still need to be addressed right.
Of course. One of the biggest hurdles is access. New treatments, especially those involving cutting-edge biotechnology, often come with a pretty hefty price tag. So ensuring that Teprotumumab is available and affordable to all who need it, regardless of their financial situation, is a crucial step.
Yeah, it's a shame that cost can be such a barrier
Yeah.
to potentially life-changing treatments.
Yeah.
What else do we need to consider?
Well, awareness is another key factor. TEP is often misdiagnosed or diagnosed late, partly because the symptoms can mimic other conditions. So raising awareness among both healthcare professionals and the public is crucial to ensure early diagnosis and timely intervention.
Right, because the earlier the intervention, the better the chances of preventing those irreversible changes.
Precisely. And as with any new medication, there's always the need for continued research and long-term follow-up. We need to understand how long the benefits of Teprotumumab last, whether repeated treatments are needed, and what the potential long-term effects might be.
Yeah, it's a long game, isn't it? This is not a one-and-done situation.
It is. And that's why ongoing research and patient monitoring are so crucial. But even with these challenges, the potential of Teprotumumab is undeniable. It opens up a whole new avenue for treating TED, one that focuses on addressing the root cause rather than just managing the symptoms.
It really does feel like a paradigm shift. I'm curious, are there any other areas of research that you're particularly excited about in terms of TED treatment?
One area that holds immense promise is gene therapy. It's still early days, but researchers are exploring ways to modify the genes involved in TED, potentially offering a long-term or even permanent solution.
Wow, gene therapy for TED. That sounds like something straight out of science fiction.
It does, doesn't it? But that's the beauty of scientific exploration. What seems impossible today could become reality tomorrow.
Speaking of the future, what's next for Teprotumumab? What are the next steps in making this treatment available to patients?
Well, the FDA is currently reviewing the data from the clinical trials. It's a rigorous process to ensure that any new medication is safe and effective before it's approved for widespread use. If all goes well, Teprotumumab could be available to patients in the near future.
So there's a light at the end of the tunnel. That's got to be encouraging for those who have been waiting for a more effective treatment.
Absolutely. It's a time of both anticipation and hope for the TED community.
Well, I, for one, am cautiously optimistic. This research really does have the potential to transform the lives of countless people living with TED.
I share your optimism. And it's not just about Teprotumumab. It's about the ongoing quest for knowledge and better treatments for this complex and often debilitating condition.
And that brings us to the end of part 2. In our final part, we'll shift our focus to the personal stories of those living with TED. We'll hear about their experiences, their challenges, and their hopes for the future. Welcome back to the Deep Dive. We spent the last 2 parts talking about this really complex condition, thyroid eye disease. But I think now it's important to kind of shift our focus a little bit to the human side of this story.
Absolutely. TED's not just a collection of symptoms or data points. It's a lived experience. And it profoundly impacts people's lives, their relationships, their self-image, their very sense of who they are.
And sometimes hearing those personal stories can be even more powerful than any scientific data.
Oh, for sure, for sure.
So for this final part, I thought we could kind of delve into that patient experience a little bit. The challenges, the emotional toll, and of course the glimmers of hope that emerge from those stories. Stories of resilience and strength.
Yeah, I think that's a really great idea. TED is often called an invisible illness because the emotional and social impact can be far greater than the outward physical changes might suggest.
Right, yeah. Like an iceberg, where what you see on the surface is just a small fraction of the whole story.
Exactly. Imagine waking up one day and your eyes start to change. They bulge, they become red and irritated. You develop double vision. It's not just about aesthetics, right?
Yeah.
It's about feeling like you're losing a part of yourself, a part of your identity.
Yeah, it's like your own reflection in the mirror is suddenly unfamiliar, like a stranger staring back at you.
Right. And then you have these practical challenges like difficulty reading, driving, working on a computer. Simple tasks that most people take for granted suddenly become incredibly difficult, sometimes even impossible.
Yeah. And that can lead to a sense of isolation, frustration, even despair, right?
Absolutely. People with TED often talk about feeling very self-conscious, like they're constantly being stared at. So they might avoid social situations, withdraw from their loved ones, feel like a burden to their families.
It's a heavy load to carry, both physically and emotionally. And it's something that's often misunderstood or minimized by those who haven't experienced it firsthand.
Exactly. That's why it's so important to create spaces where people with TED can feel seen, heard, and understood,
Mm.
where they can share their stories, connect with others who get it, and find support and encouragement.
Those connections are so vital.
Hmm.
To know that you're not alone, that others have walked this path before you and have come out the other side.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's where organizations like the National Graves' Disease Foundation, they play such a crucial role in, providing resources, support groups, and just a sense of community.
And of course, there's the power of storytelling. When people share their personal experiences, it not only helps them process their own emotions and find healing, but it also helps to raise awareness, right? And educate others.
Oh, for sure. Sharing our stories is an act of both vulnerability and strength, I think. It's a way of saying, this is me, this is my experience, and it matters.
Yeah. And those stories can be incredibly inspiring, can't they? To see people facing these challenges with courage and resilience, and even humor sometimes. It's a reminder that even in the face of adversity, the human spirit can shine through.
It truly can. And that brings us back to the potential impact of teprotumumab. If this treatment can alleviate the physical symptoms, improve vision, and restore a sense of normalcy to people's lives, imagine the ripple effects that could have, on their emotional and social well-being.
It's like lifting a weight off their shoulders, not just physically, but emotionally as well.
Exactly. And that's why this research is so much more than just a scientific breakthrough. It's a story of hope, resilience, and the human spirit's unwavering pursuit of a brighter future.
Well said. Well, that seems like a perfect note to end on, doesn't it?
It does.
This has been such an incredible journey, hasn't it? Exploring the science, the challenges, and the human stories behind thyroid eye disease.
It really has. I hope that, our listeners have gained a deeper understanding of this condition and the impact it has on people's lives.
Yeah, I hope so too. And I hope they leave, this deep dive feeling informed, engaged, and maybe even a little bit inspired.
Me too.
So until next time, keep those eyes open for new discoveries, new stories, new reasons to believe in the power of human ingenuity and resilience.
And don't forget to keep those eye appointments.
Good one. Okay, folks, that's a wrap on this episode of The Deep Dive. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time for another deep dive into a fascinating topic.
Take care.